Hi, and welcome to Law, Justice, and Social Change. I'm really excited for you to be in this class. It's such a fun and interesting look at the law in ways that we've really never thought about. In our first lecture, we're going to talk about law's unique relationship to society and to you. Before we dive right in, let me give you a few definitions to remember. Now, some of these may be a little unclear at first, but I think as we move through the course, they'll become a lot more clear. First, social structure. Well, social structure really is a patterned social arrangement in society. It's this system of socioeconomic stratification, social institutions, or organizations. Social institutions, these are a system of behavioral and relationship patterns that are interwoven and enduring and function across society. These work to structure the behavior of individuals. We'll talk more about these in another lecture. Social stratification is the unequal distribution of people across categories providing differential access to scarce resources. We measure inequality in a society by its social stratification. And lastly, law. Law really refers to two different things, right? It refers to rules and regulations, but it's also a social institution of itself, in that it's a set of established procedures for creating, implementing, and enforcing rules and regulations. At the heart of any discussion on law and its relationship to society and to us is the debate between free will and determinism. This debate is a long-standing philosophical and scientific discussion that centers around the extent to which individuals have control over their own actions and choices. So free will posits that individuals have the ability to make choices that are not predetermined by any kind of external factors. Determinism suggests that events, including our own behavior, really are the inevitable result of some prior cause. Now, the free will perspective would argue that individuals possess the capacity to make choices. That is, they have the power of acting without the constraint of necessity or fate. The ability to act at our own discretion. Now, the idea of free will suggests that our decisions are shaped by a combination of personal desires, intentions, and even our own cognitive processes. Imagine a student who has just graduated from high school. They have an opportunity to choose between pursuing a career in, I don't know, say medicine, or becoming an artist. Now, advocates of free will are going to argue that the student's decision really depends on their own personal interest, maybe values and their aspirations. Now, external factors like their family expectations or even societal pressures may influence the decision, but the final choice is still considered the result of the student's free will. From this viewpoint, individuals can be held morally responsible for their actions because they have the ability to choose between various options. On the other hand, determinism asserts that all events, including our own human actions and choices, our behavior, is really governed by external causes. In this view, the future is completely determined by present forces outside of our control, like social structure or even the laws of nature. While this perspective doesn't necessarily negate the idea of personal experience and decision making within there, it suggests that those experiences and decisions are ultimately shaped by factors beyond an individual's control. Let's take Georgia State, for example. It's a really great school. But let me ask you, if money, time, and resources were of no consequence, that is, all of them were unlimited, would you have chosen Georgia State for your education? Why not Harvard, maybe Princeton, or even Stanford? The question brings up an interesting proposition that human agency, that is, our choices may actually be constrained by things that are outside of our control. Now let's consider this debate in the context of the socioeconomic ladder. The socioeconomic ladder refers to the hierarchical structure that represents different levels of economic and social status within society. It's really a metaphorical way of visualizing the distribution of wealth in society. Now, individuals or families are placed at different rungs based on their socioeconomic position. So those at the higher rungs, right, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, they typically enjoy great wealth, income, education, they have social privilege. Now, those at the lower rungs, those who may be even at the bottom of the rung, are going to experience lower economic or maybe even no economic opportunities and reduce access to any type of resources and really have no advantages. Now, the latter reflects the concept of social stratification, which is the division of society into different levels or strata based on various factors such as wealth, education, occupation, social power. Now, it's going to definitely highlight the inequalities that exist within society and show that people at different rungs really have different challenges, right? So individuals from different socioeconomic backgrounds may face different challenges in terms of accessing opportunities and resources. Now, an interesting thing here about the ladder is that until you're really kind of out and striking your own course in the world, where you land on this ladder is completely and entirely dependent upon your parents and your family. So we don't really get a choice in where we ultimately begin at the ladder. Now, there's this idea of social mobility, right? So we could, the American dream tells us, right, that we can start at maybe rung 3 and we can go all the way up to rung 10, right, if we work hard and work smart. Now, it can also go the other way, right? We could be at rung 8 and we could make a bad business decision, and the next thing you know, we're on rung 4, right? So social mobility does go both ways, but we usually think of it in terms of stratification, how we move up the ladder. Now, those at ladder rung, right, that was what we're going to call concentrated poverty. Now, oftentimes, we really don't see a lot of access to resources and education and opportunities here. And so what happens is when you are born into that concentrated poverty, those individuals don't usually get any benefit of mobility. Those individuals typically stay around that rung. And let's think about it. Who has the better chance of going to college, of getting into Harvard or to Stanford? Somebody at level 6 or somebody at level 2? At level 6, maybe somebody had a tutor for their SAT. Certainly not at level 2. Consider this. Consider two individuals, one who was born into a family of highly educated professionals and another born into a family with limited access to education and resources. The person from the well-educated family may have greater opportunities to pursue higher education and to secure that prestigious job, potentially advancing themselves up on the socioeconomic ladder. Meanwhile, the person from the less privileged background might face barriers, right, to education and may find it more challenging to access any type of high-paying job, and potentially they're going to remain on the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder. Let's think about the free will and determinism debate again, with the concept of the socioeconomic ladder fresh in our minds. Consider a child who's grown up in concentrated poverty with extremely limited access to education and other resources. This child eventually becomes involved in criminal activities as a teen. Now, determinists will argue that the child's environment and lack of access to opportunities and resources, all things that were determined by their position on the ladder, actually heavily influence their actions. From this perspective, the person's criminal behavior is a result of circumstances that were largely beyond their control. This brings us to the sociological perspective, a way of looking at society and our relationship to society. It's the lens that we're going to employ throughout this course. The sociological perspective argues that our lives are profoundly affected by the larger social system and society's social structure. This in turn exerts enormous influence on our behavior. Think of it this way, together with our race and gender, where we are on that social economic ladder creates really our own personal social context, the way we know and see the world. This perspective suggests that our own personal agency is limited by where we are on that ladder, and that all of our behavior is really structurally defined. Even our criminal choices are structurally defined. I mean, think about it. Who becomes a criminal and who doesn't? And what type of crime a person engages in? Embezzlement versus robbery, for example. It's all about access and opportunity, which is defined by our position in society. Now, if you're thinking that this sounds really unfair, you're right. Social structure is inherently biased. It encourages people to use difference to include or exclude, reward or punish, credit or discredit, elevate or oppress, value or devalue. Privilege is a seesaw with disadvantage on the other side. Now, social structure is divisive. It divides people into groups based on two types of characteristics: ascribed characteristics and achieved characteristics. Now, ascribed characteristics are those things about yourself that you can't change, right? Where you are on, where your parents are on the socioeconomic ladder when you're born, right? Your race, your sex assigned at birth. Now, achieved characteristics are characteristics that you kind of gather along the way. High school graduate, college graduate, college professor, right? So these are just the different achievements and characteristics that you kind of achieve along the way. They cannot be positive. They can also be negative, right? So felon, right? So high school graduate, felon, those kind of things. Okay. So where does law come into this picture? Well, it's just like any other social institution. It has a reciprocal relationship with society. That is, law affects society and society affects law. And of course, this relationship affects us. Law has an enormous impact on us as individuals. In fact, probably nothing has more impact. Think about it. Driving, speeding, traffic lights, a lease on an apartment, buying a house, getting a mortgage, paying taxes, getting married, getting divorced. Just think about all of the laws that regulated the production of your computer, or all of the laws that regulated the marketing of your computer, the purchase of your computer, how your computer maybe was shipped to you at home, right? All of these things coming to bear essentially on our lives. It really truly is inescapable. Lastly, I want to leave you with some characteristics of law's relationship to society that I want you to kind of think about as we progress through this course. First, law manifests itself in different forms at different levels of society. That is, law is seen and experienced differently by different groups in society. It could be a source of justice or a source of oppression. Now, while we each view and experience law differently, no view or experience can be invalidated. Yet, no one view or experience by itself captures the totality of law. As such, the irony is, it's really impossible to generalize about the nature of law. Okay, thanks for joining me in this mini lecture. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. You can give me a call or shoot me an email, and I will get back to you. Thanks again. Bye-bye.